It is spring 2016. Time to continue working on the 1974 StarCraft Chieftain Mark IV. I apologize for not having documented the rebuild of this boat with video. At that time, I did not realize that other people would be interested in the process. For now, I will present the story the best I can with images. I promise to take videos of the process after I begin again. Over the winter, I worked on drawings and decided on a design for the cabin. I reached out to several marine glass companies in Canada and the United States. To be honest, several of the companies almost laughed at me, not giving me any information, just big bills. Then Motion Windows, Peninsula Glass in Washington responded. Friendly, courteous service. This is where I ordered my new windows. The aluminum cabin roof was carefully removed. Many rusted nuts and bolts. The roof will be used at a later stage. The glass was removed and saved. Maybe I can find someone who can make use of them. Finally, all the cabin was removed. Sharon examined the results, making sure nothing was missed. I scraped and sanded the gunnels or gunwales of the boat so that a fresh coat of paint could be applied. The new windows have arrived. They are in the shipping crate in the upper left of the screen. Marine plywood is prepared for the making of the sides of the cabin. The sides are 10.5 feet, which means that an 8-foot sheet of plywood must be extended. The only glue used is epoxy. Screws are used to hold the pieces tight together while the epoxy cures. The wood is sanded as smooth as possible. After primer and a paint is applied, I do not want to see any joins in the wood. The windows had no damage from shipping. They were positioned on the sides in order to draw the cut lines. The window openings were cut into the plywood sides. You can see plastic over the sawhorses. This is to prevent the epoxy from making a mess when all cut edges were coated with epoxy. All surfaces were coated with epoxy primer. The cutout areas had 2 coats applied to prevent moisture from seeping into the wood around the windows. The original aluminum roof had its tie-down bars removed. The surface was cleaned of all old paint using stripper and much scraping and sanding. Aluminum primer was applied to the bare metal. The side walls were stood up on the garage floor. Braces were put in to keep the bottom at the correct distance apart. The upper part of the walls were also braced to prevent movement. The roof was supported above to be used as a template. The roof was slowly lowered down onto the walls, and a pencil mark was made for each of the original screw holes. The roof was moved to the side while all the screw holes were drilled and tapped using a stainless lag bolt. Every hole was filled with silicone. Then a good bead of silicone was applied where the roof would sit. The roof was then repositioned on top of the walls. Stainless steel lag screws were inserted and tightened in each pre-drilled hole. A ratchet wrench helped working in the small space. Finally, all the lag bolts were tightened. The walls were checked with a plumb line, measuring the distance from the line to the bottom of the wall. The walls were then braced while the silicone cured. I apologize for the video and pictures of moving the cabin from the garage to the boat. Somehow my SD card failed and I lost them all. I had forks made from 4x4s in the bucket of a backhoe, then very carefully positioning the cabin on the boat. After the cabin was positioned on the hull of the boat, it was bolted on with stainless steel bolts. Then the contact point between the cabin and the hull was masked and a bead of silicone was put on. The boat sits waiting for a front wall. You can see where braces were installed to keep walls at the correct angle until the front wall is put into place. Fabrication of the front walls began. I had previously did all the calculations of size and angles of the two sections. All pieces were made of marine plywood and glued with epoxy. After the epoxy had cured, all the little bumps and dribbles were sanded down. Sanding epoxy is not that easy. It quickly clogs the sandpaper. White 4x8 sheets of plastic from Home Depot were used to sheet the inside of the cabin. I fitted the plastic sheets to the sections for the front walls. These plastic sheets give a waterproof surface that is easy to clean. The angles where the walls meet each other are now cut. Fresh coat of epoxy applied to the cut surface. Foam insulation is inserted into any spaces behind the plastic sheet. This gives the walls firmness, not just thin plastic over spaces. Epoxy primer is then applied. The front sections of the cabin were carefully fitted together. Stainless steel leg screws were used to secure the roof to the sections. Since the holes were not pre-drilled, some pressure was applied with wedges in order to help the screws bite through the epoxy and take hold. The process was continued for all the remaining leg screws, including some from under the dash upward into the sections. Silicone was used to make beads at all the joints, and a coat of white paint was applied over the gray primer. In order to assist pulling wires in the future from below the walls to the ceiling compartment, after the white plastic was secured on, I ran string from the ceiling to under the walls prior to installing the plastic. You can see foam insulation in the spaces between the wall and the plastic sheet. Beads of No More Nails was applied liberally to all surfaces the white plastic sheets would be applied to. The plastic sheets were pre-cut in the garage before bringing out the cabin, so it was pretty easy to fasten them with the beads of No More Nails. The plastic was pushed tightly into place. A rubber mallet assisted to make sure everything was snug before the glue dried. Finally, this part of the job was completed. Now it is ready for the windows. My grandson Lee came by to assist with installing the windows. Following the instructions that came with the windows, weather stripping was applied to the edges that would make contact with the window openings in the walls. Lee sitting on top of a stepladder waiting to pass me a window. I was checking the windows by opening them and making sure they weren't sticking. Sometimes a small bump would have to be removed for the window to fit correctly. All fresh cuts were resealed before final installation. With Lee holding the window from the outside, I tapped the window into place and put enough screws to hold it there until all the windows were inserted. Now that all the windows were in place, we screwed in dozens of screws, which were supplied by the manufacturer. Each one had to be tightened equally without stripping the screw. These windows were designed by the manufacturer to withstand large waves slamming into them, in case the boat was caught out in a storm. It would not be good if a window shattered. It felt good to see the boat cabin take shape and look like what I had planned in my designs. I think it's looking really great. After 1 year, the utility plywood, coated twice with epoxy, was failing. It had been a complete waste of money. All the floor and floor joists had to be removed. I replaced everything with 1x5 cedar decking. 2 52-gallon below-deck fuel tanks were ordered and installed. No hoses were attached yet, but access to the tanks was allowed. I sprayed foam under the floor and in the hull area. The specs from the company says it works fine for marine use. Foam was not used in the center line of the boat, so any water could flow unhindered to the stern of the boat. In this picture, the back wall has been installed. You can see the cedar floor inside the cabin. Eventually, this aluminum door will be the back door of the cabin. The cabin is now complete for this summer. The boat will now sit until I could work on it next. There's still a lot of work to do. If you liked this video, please click like to let me know that there is an interest in this topic. Click subscribe to view videos about fishing, UTV adventures, cooking, my boat renovation. Many topics are coming soon.